Good Monday evening and welcome to another week of Overtime here on WOTM. I am Gerhard Mathangani and we have a very special co-host in the house tonight, Chase Robinson, the host of WKXS Live. That's on Fox Sports Radio 102.9. Chase, you and I have known each other for forever. You have a television background. You used to work here with TV24 for a long time in television. Two things. Number one, let's talk about your world in radio, as everybody's seeing right now, and also how and when sports fans can catch your show. Yeah, so I'm on Monday through Friday from 2 to 4 on Fox Sports 102.9. Covers all of Northeast Alabama. And, yeah, coming up on a year. It'll be a year in November that I've been with Fox Sports 102.9 as the program director and afternoon show host. And excited to, I've spent 6 years in television, so to now move over into radio, it's a lot of fun. Exactly. And for those that don't know, you also do a lot of high school sports, college sports, and professional sports. And you're also the home of the Atlanta Braves radio, and I'm sure that's a really fun time right now. It sure is. Gives us a lot to talk about, and then all the games, you hear them on Fox Sports 102.9. Even tomorrow afternoon's game, we'll be cutting into my show to bring that. So, yeah, we're excited for some playoff baseball. Well, no doubt about it. We'll talk about that in a little bit. We'll also talk a little high school football. But first, we'll start in the college world. And Chase, this is another situation. I'm sure this is one of the things that you talked about on your shows over the past couple of weeks is Alabama, how they handle after going to Texas A&M and losing. They got a nice win in Starkville, 49-9 over Mississippi State. What were some of your takeaways on Saturday after Alabama's matchup? Yeah, I think the big talking point, especially from Nick Saban, and you probably heard it last week, how is this team going to respond? And that's always a question after a team loses. I thought they responded great. Right. I mean, they came out. A lot of folks wanted them to run the ball more. They ran the ball more. Brian Robinson had a lot of touches. He's fun to watch. Trey Sanders got in there and made some big plays. You see them kind of be more healthy now. They kind of have a chip on their shoulder now. I thought they played great, bouncing back, and I think this may just be the start of a new hungry Alabama football team. They've always had a situation at Alabama where their one-loss teams, to me, have always been super dangerous. Nick Saban's got a bunch of national championships, but only 2 teams went undefeated. A weird, wacky year last year, and then, of course, that first year when that team went undefeated. Do you think, like all the other one-loss teams, that this is something they could take this performance and sustain that throughout the rest of the year? Yeah, I think so. A lot of those guys who are on this Alabama team have not lost in a Crimson Tide jersey. Right. And they felt that loss last Saturday, and I'm sure they felt it at practice last Monday or Sunday, and they don't want to feel that again. Right. They know the pressure that's on them. So I think because of that loss, you mentioned one-loss Alabama teams are dangerous. Because of that loss, I think they're going to have this fresh mindset of we have to go perform under this pressure. We have got to win, and I think that's going to really help Alabama. Exactly. I think so, too. And one of the things that Nick Saban always talked about, and you mentioned it, was make sure you feel this. That way, whenever you feel the pain of this, it'll motivate you to do the right things as you move forward. I think that's exactly what they did. I'm in a complete agreement with you. Tight end coach Nick Saban, as well as quarterback Bryce Young, spoke with the media today, talked about bouncing back after that loss last week.
The question is can this become a part of who we are, or does something bad have to happen for us to respond in the way we need to respond? And I think that's a challenge for all of us, and that's a challenge for all of our players and the leadership on our team to continue to do the things we need to do. Guys that practiced well, played well in the game, guys that prepared well, played well in the game. So that's something that we need to continue to do.
Last week we definitely had a really good week of practice. We were locked in. We had that wake-up call, and I think it showed. I think we did a lot of good things. So that's really a big theme for us, is to make sure that that's not just a one-week thing, not just a reaction, but for us to go back to making that the standard.
Meanwhile, Chase, coming up next is a big battle against Tennessee. We'll take a look back to last week in Knoxville. And obviously, by now, I'm sure a lot of people know kind of the ugly ending over there in Knoxville. Two things. Number one, what are some of your thoughts about Bama playing this Tennessee football team, who seems to be a little bit more improved than they were the past couple of years? And then what did you make of all of this mess last week? Well, I'll start with the second part. I mean, that's a disgrace to college football. Yeah. Really, it's embarrassing. There's no need for that. I saw several people on social media saying, well, you got to look at the situation. Other SEC teams would do this. No, I don't think so. Right. I think that's something you would only see
there in that situation, and I hate it, and it's uncalled for. And that's not what college football is about, and so I hated to see that. But this is, you mentioned, it's a different Tennessee team.
For sure.
It really is, and there's some bright spots. There's still some questions, but yeah, I think Alabama can win this game. But this is we're seeing a different Tennessee team, and I think Josh Heupel has a lot to do with that. I think he's a great addition to the Tennessee staff. He's somebody that they needed, and so I think that this Tennessee team in the future, I think we'll start seeing them progress.
I think so too. I mean, because of the new waiver wire and the transfer portal, you can now flip your rosters, I think, a little bit faster and a little bit easier. And I think he's got them on the right step, and especially using the transfer portal last year. Meanwhile, let's go to our rankings for this past week. Obviously, the number one question was going to be, well, how far was Iowa going to fall after losing? Any beef with the way that the pollsters saw the top 10 saw the top 25? The closer that we get to the committee making their announcements.
I don't think so. I thought it was pretty straightforward of how the weekend went. You know, this is just the AP, so it's not the one that's really going to matter in the end. But, you know, I think they've got it right. You know, I think we'll continue to see things shuffle around as we learn more about these teams.
Exactly. Your take on Cincinnati or any team maybe out of the Power 5 that has impressed you, because you have Cincinnati in this ranking, as well as you got Coastal Carolina, who's played really well as of late. You got some teams, UTSA, some other teams that are not necessarily in the top or Power 5, or not even necessarily in the part of the upper echelon of great conferences, getting some love here by this committee. Yeah,
you know, this seems like a different kind of college football season. Just the way you don't have your normal Clemsons and Ohio States, you know, and Alabama up there in the top 3, and so it's opening up holes for some of these teams. I think of UTSA, who, you know, is in Conference USA, and Coastal Carolina, who we heard a lot about last year. Even Cincinnati, who's been right there on the cusp of doing something great. They have an opportunity to do that now because some of these bigger teams, like your Clemsons, are not up there.
Right.
In the top spots.
Exactly. Well, and we'll get the committee's rankings coming up in a couple of weeks. I think it's the first Tuesday in November when we get those committee rankings. Meanwhile, we'll look through 11 through 25. Iowa dropping from number 2 down to number 11. That's a pretty seismic drop, but you lose by, 17 points at home. It's a really tough spot there. You see a lot of the other teams that are ranked, including some of the teams out of the SEC. Auburn's bumped up now up to number 19. Their 2 losses on the year to 2 teams that are right now in the top 10 of their poll, Georgia and Penn State. I don't see a lot of beef either, and I think that there's still room for some of these teams to make some noise. I think Coastal Carolina still has a long way to go. Some teams that are outside of the Power 5. But you take a look at a team like Ole Miss. Their only losses to Bama. Take a look at a team like Notre Dame. Could they creep back? I think there's still a lot more questions to be answered, even though I think we still think Georgia and Bama will be 2 of the 4.
Yeah, and I think they're you know, up at the top, and then you have some of these other teams who can fight for a spot there. But, you know, I think of Auburn. They're the best 2-loss team in the country, I think,
exactly.
Especially the way they played Saturday. So, you know, they'll probably move up some. And depending on how Texas A&M finishes out, you know, there's a lot of good teams that have a chance to put themselves in positions they've never been before, I think.
Exactly right. That's your top 25 by the Associated Press. Meanwhile, we want to remind you that coming up on Thursday night, you can catch another ranked team on the high school level, Maplesville. Devils taking on Otagoville. That game is set for Thursday right here on WOTM, as well as My 68. Mickey Shadrix and I will be on the call Thursday night, 7 o'clock kickoff for the AHSAA Amherst game of the week this week. We'll go down to 1A for some great football down south. Well, coming up next here on Overtime, we'll talk a little Auburn Tiger football as they go into a little bit of a rest week. We'll also talk a little bit more about teams in and around the state of Alabama who had nice weekends in football. Welcome back to Overtime here on WOTM. We will move from Alabama over to Auburn. Of course, the Tigers over the weekend went back to the road. I think this has probably been the nicest, best test for this Auburn football team. It's a realistic test. You went to Penn State. You knew Penn State was probably a better football team. Then they played against Georgia, and I think most people knew that Georgia was better. I think this was the litmus test for Auburn this week against Arkansas in Fayetteville and got the win there. They're now 5-2 overall. What did you make of the Tigers' performance in Arkansas?
I thought it was one of their best of the season. I mean, this is a very good Arkansas team that they're playing. Bo Nix was as sharp as could be. I mean, he looked like one of the best quarterbacks in the country at times.
Yeah.
He was hitting his targets, and the receivers did great.
Right.
He hit 10 different receivers Saturday. That's incredible.
Right. Yeah.
And you know, that was been a question mark about Auburn all season long, was who's going to step up as receiver. We saw 10 guys on Saturday, so I thought this was a great performance from Auburn. Arkansas made some mistakes. Auburn capitalized on them. Thought it was a great day for the Tigers.
Exactly. I know most people did not put Auburn in that upper tier of the SEC. It's not Bama, it's not Georgia. But do you think that with this win, they've kind of now moved up to that second tier? Now, whatever that second tier looks like to most people, I think Arkansas was in that. I think Texas A&M is in that. But now, are they still there? Do you think they're at that second tier, like just scratching the heels of Alabama and Georgia? Or do you still think that there's a healthy gap between the two?
I think there's a gap, but this Auburn team, and like some Auburn teams in the past, they can be sneaky. And I think they may, you know, they've got Ole Miss coming up, they've got Texas A&M coming up, they've got Alabama. I think they're going to win at least one or two of those games. So I think they can sneak out some more wins, and that will push them a little forward. I think we have to see more from this team, more consistency. I think consistency is the big word for Auburn this year. We need to see more consistency to know where they belong in the SEC.
It's been such an up and down year so far, so this question might be hard to answer, but do you think they have what it takes in order to keep that consistency up? Because as you talked about it, they'll have a bye week, and then it's a nice little gauntlet of teams that I think are on Auburn's level. I think Ole Miss might be a little bit better as far as just on paper, their roster versus Auburn's roster. But I do think that they're good tests moving forward, a lot like this Arkansas team was a test.
Yeah, it is, and we'll find out a lot about Auburn in the weeks to come. I think this bye week comes at a good time for them, maybe a good time, you know, especially after the win Saturday. You get to kind of catch your breath and start over for a little bit, or it could hurt them coming off, you know, losing that momentum. So I think it's going to be interesting to see the following week when they do play Ole Miss, to see how they respond to this off week, or if the momentum keeps going, or if the momentum stops.
Exactly. Because there's an off week, Brian Harsin did not meet in the media today. We'll catch him coming up next week. Meanwhile, we'll take a look at in and around the state of Alabama. We always talk Alabama and Auburn, but we always take a peek in with some of the teams playing on the FBS and FCS levels. Meanwhile, UAB, Troy, and South Alabama all got wins out of the Power 5, right outside of the Power 5, all got wins out of the FBS. And meanwhile, Jacksonville State and Sanford out of the FCS both had a bye week last week, and they have tough challenges coming up this week. Anything stick out to you from the other teams in and around the state of Alabama in college football?
Yeah, I like to keep up with all these teams, of course. And South Alabama has been really interesting to watch. You know, they kind of got some good transfers this year, and they're really trying to, Kane Womack's really trying to put that team together. UAB is always fun to watch. I love watching UAB football, what Coach Clark has there. We saw all the guys they had coming back this year, and you can tell when you look at the scores and the teams that they're beating. This is a veteran team they're putting out on the field.
Exactly. Meanwhile, over at Jacksonville State, this is a program that you know really well, living and working in the East Alabama area. I do too. Jacksonville State has a really, really tough test coming up this week. They go all the way to Texas to face undefeated, defending national champion Sam Houston. I mean, I don't think most people would be surprised if JC loses that game. However, I do think that they can make a large statement by playing really well against this football team. You know,
we talk about consistency with Auburn. We need to see some consistency from JSU. You know, it's been kind of up and down at times, and they have a chance to make a name for themselves playing Sam Houston, and we saw Stephen F. Austin come to JSU. JSU beat them. Well, they had a one-touchdown game with Sam Houston. So, you know, I think JSU has an opportunity here to really grow in this game against the #1 team in the country.
No doubt about it. It should be an interesting week in college football with teams in and around the state of Alabama. Meanwhile, there's another big news dropping going on in college football. Is, of course, Ed Orgeron, the head coach of the LSU Tigers, the coach in the school, announcing that he will not return in 2021, making yet another interesting session for another power job, a job where you can immediately impact the college football landscape, SEC, and compete for national championships. What do you think, LSU? let me ask you this first off. Do you think it's the right move for LSU? And where, if you're LSU, do you think they should go next?
Well, I think this was kind of inevitable that this was going to happen. The LSU fans were not happy. I think it was just, when was this going to happen? I'm not sure I was expecting it to go this way.
Right.
You know, from what I was told at the end of last week, if they lost the game at Florida, he was going to be fired on the way to the bus after the game. But then this happened. It was just, you don't see this a lot.
Right.
The way that they're doing this, especially after he got a huge win against Florida on Saturday. But this is probably the best job, one of the top 2 jobs in the country right now. And so, you know, and Scott Woodward he goes after the big dog. So I'm sure he will with this job too.
Exactly. And I do think that they rushed to pay him the extension after that 2019 football team, and now they're in a situation where they'll pay him. Obviously, not sure the actual buyout or actually what they settled on, but then obviously you have to go in another direction to find a new guy. We'll talk about some possible replacements coming up here. Which one to you, if you were making the choice, is the more attractive job, USC or LSU?
It's hard to say because you would think LSU being in the SEC, but I mean, you're in the SEC West. You're going to be playing against Nick Saban,
right? And
there's no telling how long that he's going to be the head coach at Alabama. So do I want to go out on the West Coast in the Pac-12 where I have a good chance of winning football games, or do I go to LSU where you're in a very tradition-rich program, but you're in the toughest conference playing against the greatest football coach of all time? It's hard to weigh out. LSU is a fantastic job, and they're going to get a big name in this job.
Oh, yeah. They'll get a quality coach because they have the funds and the resources to help make it happen. Of course, also being in the SEC really helps out there. Let's take a listen to Coach Orgeron on his time there at LSU.
I'm honored that I got to be the head coach at LSU. This administration has treated me with class, with dignity the whole time that I've been here. They've given me everything that we needed to have success. I met with the players today. It's the first time that I get to talk to the players before I wanted to talk to you. But I am happy that I can be the coach of the LSU Tigers towards the end of the season. And I promise you this, we're not going to blink. I'm glad we beat Florida. Tomorrow's going to be Tell the Truth Monday. And we're going to be on to Ole Miss. And I'm going to take it one day at a time. But I'm always going to appreciate my time here. I have no regrets. Not one day. I was not going to have a bad day. I'm not going to blink. I'll tell you guys that. You know, the circumstances that we haven't won enough games in the last 2 years, I totally get it. I want to take a little time off. You know, I'm 60 years old, of course, for 37 years. I think I'm going to have enough money to buy me a hamburger, and every once in a while, maybe a double meat cheeseburger, a Sonic. But I want to take a little time off to find out what direction I want to be in. You asked me if I think today I'm not going to coach. That might be different a month from now, but right now I want to take a little time off, spend with my kids.
So kids and hamburgers is where he's going to go from here on out. Here's a quick list of possible replacements for Ed Orgeron at LSU. Of course, like you said, they're going to try to get a big fish. Do you like any of the names on this list, or do you maybe see somebody else outside of it where it's more attractive for LSU?
I think this is a pretty strong list. I like Billy Napier. I don't know if they want to humble themselves to go to Louisiana Lafayette to get their next head coach, but I think he would be fantastic there. Mel Tucker as well, who's coached for Nick Saban. Those are big names on that list, and I think that the LSU job is attractive enough. It just depends on if these coaches want to come to Baton Rouge.
Exactly, and work in the SEC, as you said, in the SEC West. And it ain't going to get any easier with Texas and Oklahoma walking into the conference relatively soon. Well, coming up next here on Overtime, we'll talk Atlanta Braves baseball. Of course, Chase knows a lot about that. We'll also talk a little college football. That and more next. Closing segment here of Overtime. Chase, let's talk Atlanta Braves baseball. They got a nice win at home in Game 2, also won Game 1, both in dramatic fashion. Eddie Rosario was the hero yesterday. Your thoughts now on the Braves after this 2-run lead here in the NLCS?
They've got good momentum right now heading to Los Angeles, and it's going to be – the Dodger Stadium is not friendly to the Atlanta Braves. And but I think the pitching is set up where the Braves can be successful on the road. They've got the momentum. They've got the offense. This is the makings for a good Braves team.
No doubt about it. of course, there's going to be some skeletons in the closet because of what happened last year. But do you think that they can make it happen and pull this thing off?
I think they can. I really do. I think they have the pieces in place. They're playing with house money. I mean, this is if there's a time for the Braves to go to the World Series, this is it.
Exactly, and they're playing really, really well here lately, and I think that really works in their favor. Let's go over to college basketball. The Gonzaga Bulldogs, for the second straight season, #1 in the AP poll. They lost a lot. Lost Jalen Suggs from last year. Lost Corey Kispert from last year's team as well. What do you make of Gonzaga, and do you think that they have enough to erase last year and make a run this year?
I think just that bad taste in their mouth is going to help them with that this year, and they do. They're always talented. They're always good. I think they could very easily make another run at it again this year, and they did lose some key pieces though. But once again, they've brought a fresh group in, and I think. If not this year, in the next year, they'll be right back up there.
Exactly. The nation's #1 recruiting class is Gonzaga. We'll take a quick look at the top 10 here. Some of the names we're used to seeing, like Duke and Kentucky, expected to have a nice little season here. Do you expect any of these teams to kind of come out of the gates and be huge?
Well, I don't know if come out of the gate. I think it'll take some time. But, I think this UCLA team's going to be good once again. I think Kansas is as well, Villanova. It's going to be interesting to see how Duke and Kentucky kind of rebound from last season. That was not the typical Duke and Kentucky and North Carolina team. So I'm interested to see how they come out this year.
Exactly, and your defending champion Baylor sitting in there at #8. Meanwhile, at 11 through 25, you got Alabama and Auburn both ranked in there. I think both the Tide and Tiger fans have a lot to look forward to this year.
Absolutely. I mean, it's exciting for the state of Alabama to have both teams in the top 25 in college basketball. Who would have thought that?
Exactly. Bama's the top 15 team. They'll take on that Gonzaga basketball team really early on in the season. Final thing we'll look at here is high school football. Got some notable storylines here going into coming from last week. We'll just take a look at the storylines coming from last week's games and going into this week. Obviously, so much to look forward to over the next few days here in high school ball.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually talked with Geraldine head coach Michael Davis on my show this afternoon about taking down Fife. Great win for those guys. Glad to see them get the win. But look at that slate of games this week. Leeds and Alexandria. Amazing game. Thompson, Hoover. Couldn't ask for any better than these games right here.
No doubt about it. You also see a great game on Thursday night in the Maplesville-Autauga WOTM AHSAA Game of the Week. That's Thursday at 7 o'clock. Chase, thank you so much for joining us here. Catch him on WKXX Live tomorrow from 2 until what time?
2 to 2:50 tomorrow. Normally 2 to 4, yeah.
Right, because you got the Braves. Then stick around, listen to the Braves game. Chase, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you here tomorrow night with John Holder.